Welcome into the Chinquapin Cottage Conversations. For this conversation, we come off the farm to here, the University of South Carolina at Aiken, in Aiken, South Carolina, for a conversation with Dr. David Dillard-Wright, an associate professor of philosophy here at USC Aiken. Dr. Dillard-Wright is the author of several books on the topic of mindfulness. Those books include 5-Minute Mindfulness, A Mindful Morning, and the latest, A Mindful Evening, released in January 2017. In addition to being an educator here at USC Aiken, Dr. Dillard-Wright was educated at Emory University and began his career as a pastor in rural Georgia in the Methodist tradition. Not long after that, he converted to Hinduism and in time came here to be an educator. So in today's conversation, we'll explore mindfulness, we'll explore Christianity, Hinduism, and we'll take a closer look at world religions and their role in the human experience. So join me now, if you will, as we flip through the pages of part 1 of our conversation with author, philosopher, and educator, Dr. David Dillard-Wright.
To me, it's just about staying with the present moment, trying to be in touch with whatever is happening right there, whether it's something that is going on inside your head or something that is going on in your sensory experience. So you can be mindful when seated in meditation, when you're doing a formal meditative practice. So that's hopefully the foundation, but the idea would be to eventually move mindfulness into everyday life. So whether you're walking down the street or doing work or driving to work, you can still be mindful and present to that experience. So rather than living in memory or thinking about the future, you're trying to stay right there with whatever's happening. I think mindfulness can be practiced by people from any walk of life. You could be a religious person. Of course, in Christianity, there's contemplative prayer. Of course, Buddhism, there's many different forms of meditation, many forms of meditation in Hinduism. But you could be a completely secular person and still practice mindfulness. I think maybe that accounts for some of the popularity of mindfulness because it has kind of this non-sectarian aspect to it. So you can have your home faith tradition, but also practice mindfulness. So I think it's good to have some kind of formal practice that comes from your own faith background, but you can use mindfulness to supplement that. It makes it easier to perhaps get into your own spiritual tradition if you've been doing that mindfulness practice as well. So in the first book, I was concentrating on getting into the right frame of mind to begin the day. This book is more about winding down at the end of the day, trying to get into a restful, sort of contemplative frame of mind to close out the day and de-stress from the day and get into kind of a sacred space at the close of the day. So it's you can describe it in a few words, but it's hard to do in practice. And everyone, of course, you slip up. You start thinking about your grocery list or about the things you need to do that day. The idea is just to bring yourself back into the present moment. Yeah, so it's right here. It just came out at the beginning of the year, right. But just like the other ones, it has a short reading. I tried to draw readings from all different walks of life, from different religions, philosophies. I have some scientists and some artists. There's a quote from DJ Spooky in here. So I try to find people from all different backgrounds and find an inspiring quote and then a reflection, and then after the reflection, an exercise that you can do. And I deliberately didn't put time limits on it. So you could do these exercises in as few as 5 minutes, but if you wanted to spend an hour or two, you could. So I wanted it to be accessible to anyone, whether or not you have previous experience in meditation and mindfulness. I don't know. To me, those really both go together. I used to be someone who was very otherworldly. You know, I would spend a lot of time in prayer when I was in the Christian tradition, and it was really almost to the exclusion of practical things. You know, and what I had to discover over time is that you have to combine the practical and the spiritual, otherwise you never get anywhere in life. So one of the teachers in my tradition, Ramakrishna, he said, you have to hold on to the world with one hand and hold on to the God with the other hand, and hopefully so that one day you can only hold on to God. So in the meantime, you know, we all have lives to live in the world, so we have to do all these practical things. We have to take care of our families. We have to pay the bills, but hopefully infuse that with spirituality. And I think it does require some kind of formalized practice, but I think that mindfulness is just very adaptable to just our crazy, hectic, busy lives. So. Um, I mean, in a way, I guess every single time you sit down to meditate is different. So the circumstances of your life are going to be different each time. But um, at the close, I mean, my main focus at the end of the day is to, well, first of all, you have to finish all the things that you need to get done, the evening routine, you know, making dinner. We have 3 kids, you know, making sure they all have their baths, putting them down to bed. My wife and I usually do some work at night because, you know, we both have professional careers. But after that, to get into like a good sleep routine and stuff, and try to calm down, trying to wind it down. If you don't have some kind of ritual to calm down, then it just leads to like loss of sleep, and you're sitting there worrying about, you know, the bills that you have to pay or the things that you have to do the next day, rather than sort of letting your mind relax and get that peaceful feeling and that restful night. You know, I think I said in the first book that even drinking that cup of coffee is a ritual, right? And you can drink that cup of coffee with mindfulness. So, you know, in the evening, I guess it's just about, are you living intentionally or just kind of being pushed along by the current? So I just tried, mindfulness to me is about being present to the world, being actively engaged in the world, and really trying to savor your experience. So. There were certain things that I really enjoyed about it. I mean, the people are just great. They're very loving, very kind people. You know, parishioners would bring me tomatoes that they had grown themselves. You know, they were just really nice people. You know, nothing like a tomato sandwich in the summertime for Southerners, right? So, I really like the people in church, but I guess the sermons, I felt like certain things were out of bounds. Like, you had to kind of stick to Orthodox Christian theology, and even if I felt like I was preaching this really hard-hitting social justice oriented sermon, people would still come up to me and say, "Oh, that was so sweet," right? So I wanted this kind of intellectual freedom to, because, you know, I sort of segued from theology into philosophy, and starting out with Western philosophy and then getting into Indian philosophy. But the church to me felt a little bit confining, like intellectually confining. I went to school with a lot of young intellectual Methodists in seminary, right? And almost all of my friends eventually left the Methodist Church just because they felt like, well, there was the LGBTQ issues. Also, my female friends in ministry all had a pretty hard time with the church hierarchy. I don't know. It just had this kind of cramped feeling. I don't really know how to describe it. Oh, sure. I mean, I think that's definitely positive development. Of course, there's always a backlash as well, and a lot of denominations have split in two over LGBTQ issues, and women as well. My mother was actually ordained as a Baptist minister back in the 80s, and then of course now Baptists don't ordain women anymore, but they did at that time, and then she became Methodist. But I don't know. It's not. I don't really have any special feelings against Protestantism. I just found Indian philosophy to be more pluralistic, more open to a variety of perspectives, and just theologically, I like the richness of Indian religion, the different the plurality of divine forms. It was kind of a long, slow process, but uh, the ordination process didn't go well for me. I was sort of like constantly deferred for ordination. I don't know, maybe the board was like, oh, there's something too crazy about this guy. So I had a hard time in ordination, and it was really, it really hurt my feelings personally. But through the Shivananda centers, where went on some yoga retreats, and that exposed me to Advaita Vedanta, and I started studying Vedanta philosophy, and then from there I started getting into Hindu devotional practices, first with Ganesha and then with some other gods as well. So and now I actually have a guru and a lineage and everything that I study, and I learn the traditions of that lineage. So it wasn't really like an all of a sudden kind of a thing. It was a gradual process over many, many years. I think that Christians have a point of entry into Hinduism in the doctrine of the Trinity, right? So you have three divine persons, but you affirm that they are all the same God, right? Largely speaking, this doesn't speak for all Hindus. I'm not trying to speak for all Hindus, but by and large, Hindus view the various different divinities as aspects of a single divine person. So you could be worshiping Lakshmi or Ganesha or Hanuman, but you still believe that you're worshiping the same divinity. Mm-hmm. So is Hinduism polytheistic? Well, if you mean by polytheism, are there many gods? Well, yes, Hinduism is polytheistic, but most Hindus believe that there is a single God, and by worship, it's just the same God in different forms. It's hard to say, honestly. Some Hindus will use the word idol, and they're comfortable with the word idol. The Sanskrit word is murti. So of course some Christians use images, right? When you would like Orthodox Christians use icons. I think that most Hindus view a murti in a similar way that Orthodox Christians view icons. So they do make offerings to the murti, but they view that just as a way of getting close to God. Just like on Easter Sunday, some churches will have a cross up there that has like chicken wire on it, and then you decorate the cross with flowers, right? So Hindus do that exact same thing in the rituals. Or at your church, you put money into the offering plate, right? Now, are you giving that money to God? Well, there's not like, God doesn't have a PayPal account, presumably, but you believe that that money is going to good purposes, right? So it's very similar in Hinduism. You give money at the temple, but and that money goes to maintain the temple. It goes to upkeep the deities and things like that. So. I would say that's probably the vast majority of our students. I mean, I don't have any formal numbers, but when I ask students to just raise their hands, I would say 2/3 of them are Baptist, and then there's a smattering of other students. So I don't have any great numbers, but I try to make my teaching a personal kind of a process. So I normally wouldn't reveal my own, personal religious preference. Maybe like 2/3 of the way through the semester I would, because it's a process. As I get to know the students, then they get to know me. Of course, anybody could just Google me and they would find out, exactly what my journey is. But
Sure.
In the classroom, I don't make an effort to hide my perspective, but it's also not. It probably wouldn't be there on day one either. It's kind of it's just a process. I get to know them, they get to know me, and I would say, what is more controversial than Hinduism is Darwinian evolution. I've had a few different students sort of evangelize me. They really get more up in arms about evolution than they do about Hinduism, and I find that to be very curious. Also, abortion is, of course, a hot button issue. So say that they really get more upset about those social issues than they do about the boundaries between different religions.
Thank you for watching part 1 of our conversation with Dr. David Dillard-Wright. If you'd like to find out more about his books, A Mindful Evening, A Mindful Morning, 5-Minute Mindfulness, and more, check them out at your local bookseller, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Wherever books are sold, you can find the books of Dr. David Dillard-Wright. Meanwhile, make an appointment to join us next time in the Chinquapin Cottage Conversations for part 2 of this fascinating exploration of mindfulness, Christianity, Hinduism, and world religions. That's next time in the Chinquapin Cottage Conversations. Thank you for watching and listening.